Welcome to Sleepy Stories, a place where you can leave the day behind, breathe deeply, and drift into a world of calm. Here, you'll find peaceful sleep stories designed to quiet your mind and guide you into rest. So, snuggle in, relax, and let the story carry you into dreamland. Music fades into the start of the story. Tonight, we journey back in time, across the vast steppes of Mongolia to the era of legends. We'll follow the life of Genghis Khan, a man who rose from humble beginnings to forge one of the greatest empires the world has ever known. Book 1, The Child of the Steppes, Chapter 1, The Omen. The wind never rested on the Mongolian steppe. It raced across the grasslands in endless waves, carrying with it the cries of wild horses, the scent of fresh earth, and the chill of a sky that seemed to stretch into eternity. On such a night, beneath that vast expanse of stars, a woman cried out in labor. Her name was Hoelun, wife of Yesugei the Brave, a chieftain of the Borjigin clan. Around her, the women of the camp worked quickly, their breath misting in the cold air as they urged her to push. Outside, men kept the fires stoked high, as if their flames might guard against the spirits that prowled the dark. At last, the child came forth. His first cry cut through the night like the screech of a hawk. Gasps rippled through the tent, for in his tiny hand, slick with birth blood, he clutched a dark clot the size of a walnut. The midwives whispered among themselves. To be born gripping a clot was no ordinary thing. It was an omen, a sign of destiny, of violence, of a soul fated to command life and death. Some muttered prayers. Others looked to the mother with awe. Yesugei entered, his broad shoulders filling the space, his face lit by firelight. He gazed at the child, then at the strange object in his fist. "A son," he said, his voice steady, though a flicker of unease stirred in his eyes. "A son born to conquer." He named him Temujin, after a Tatar warrior he had once captured and slain. To Yesugei, it was a gesture of triumph, a way of binding victory into his child's name. But Hoelun, exhausted, cradled the boy against her chest and whispered, "Temujin, my wolf cub, may the spirits guard you." Outside, the wind carried the howl of wolves across the plain. Chapter 2, Shadows of Childhood. Temujin's early life was one of movement. The Borjigin people were nomads, forever chasing the seasons, moving their felt tents with the herds. He grew up on horseback, learning to cling to the mane before he could walk steadily on the ground. He tasted fermented mare's milk before he had his first solid food. At night, by the fires, Yesugei told him stories of the ancient blue wolf and the fallow doe, the mythical ancestors of their people who had birthed the Mongol line. The boy listened wide-eyed, his heart stirring with visions of endless horizons and spirits that rode the wind. But fate, which had given him a blood-clot omen, was not kind for long. One summer, Yesugei rode to visit the Tatars, ancient enemies of the Borjigin. There, he shared a feast. The Tatars, pretending hospitality, poisoned his cup. Within days he returned to his family, weak and pale, his body trembling with sickness. Hoelun sat by his side as his breath grew shallow. He pressed a trembling hand against Temujin's small shoulder. "The wolves circle, boy," he rasped. "You must grow strong. Protect your mother. Protect your brothers." Then Yesugei the Brave was gone, and the Borjigin clan, fearing the wrath of his enemies, abandoned his widow and her children. Chapter 3, The Hunger Years. Without the protection of a chief, Hoelun and her children were cast out into the wilderness. Temujin was only 9 years old. The family's lives became a struggle for survival. They dug roots from the hard earth. They fished the rivers with crude bone hooks in their bare hands. Sometimes, when food ran out, they ate wild berries until their stomachs ached. The memory of feasts of roasted mutton and mare's milk in plenty became a cruel dream. Temujin learned early that hunger sharpens both the body and the mind. He taught himself to track the flight of birds, to set snares for rabbits, to read the hoofprints of gazelles across the grass. His hands grew calloused, his eyes keen. Yet survival was not enough. Hardship also bred conflict. Among Hoyland's sons, rivalry simmered, especially between Temujin and his half-brother Bektar, who was older and stronger. Bektar mocked Temujin's authority, seizing food when it was scarce and claiming the right to lead. One day, when Bektar took a fish meant for the others, Temujin and his younger brother Kasar confronted him. Words turned to blows, and at last Temujin raised his bow. His arrow flew true. Bektar fell on the step, his blood soaking the grass. Hoyland wept bitterly, but the deed was done. Temujin did not flinch. "A wolf pack cannot follow two leaders," he said. "One must rule, or all will starve." It was the first blood Temujin shed by his own hand, but not the last. Chapter 4. Shackles. The wilderness was full of enemies. Rival tribes, seeing the weakness of Hoyland's family, struck without mercy. One day, the Taichi Ud captured Temujin. They bound his neck and hands in a heavy wooden kangu so that he could not even scratch his nose. They paraded him through their camp like a trophy, the son of Yasuge humiliated before all. Children threw stones at him. Warriors laughed as they spat in his face, but Temujin's eyes never lowered. Even in chains, he met their gaze. The boy who had killed his brother with an arrow refused to bend. At night, under the pale glow of the moon, he waited. He spoke softly to one of his guards, a man of lower rank who pitied the youth's courage. One evening, that man loosened the lock. Temujin seized the chance. He fled into the reeds by the river, dragging the heavy kangway until he could slip beneath the water and hide. The horsemen of the Taichi Ud thundered past, their torches flaring, but they found nothing. By dawn, Temujin was gone, carried away by the currents and the will of destiny. The wolf cub had slipped the snare. Chapter 5. A brother in blood. Years passed. Temujin grew taller, his shoulders broader, his gaze sharper. He began to gather companions, young men drawn not by wealth or noble lineage, but by his iron will. Among them was Jamuka, son of a noble family. The two boys became inseparable, hunting together, racing their horses across the plains. They swore Anda, a blood brotherhood, sealed by oath and ritual. "We are two in spirit, one in blood," Jamuka said, clasping Temujin's arm. "Together, we will rule the steppe." Temujin returned the grip firmly. Yet deep in his heart, he sensed a difference between them. Jamuka loved glory, the trappings of power, the songs of warriors sung in his name. Temujin thought of hunger, of his mother's tears, of the long nights of exile. He dreamed not of glory, but of unity, of order, of a world where no child of his people would starve as he once had. For now, they were brothers. But brothers could become rivals. Destiny waited. Chapter 6. The Mother's Wisdom. The seasons turned, as they always did upon the steppe. Winters came with blizzards that buried the land in white silence, and summers with grass so tall it rippled like an ocean. Through it all, Hoyland guided her children with strength that never faltered. She was tall, with hair as black as raven wings and eyes sharp as flint. Even when hunger hollowed her cheeks, her voice was steady, her will unbroken. To Temujin, she was not only mother but teacher, shaping him in ways no sword or bow could. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Hoyland spoke in a low, deliberate tone. "Temujin, remember this. A man alone is nothing on the steppe. Alone, he starves, or the wolves take him. But a man who can win loyalty will never fall. Wolves hunt in packs. Men should do the same." Temujin studied her face. The firelight cast her features in shadow, but her eyes gleamed. "You must be just," she continued. "Do not favor one because he is kin or because he is rich. Favor the man who proves himself loyal and strong. That is how you will build something greater than yourself." The boy nodded, her words sinking deep into him like the bite of cold into flesh. In years to come, he would forge his empire upon this very principle: loyalty over lineage, merit over birth. But for now, it was a lesson, tucked away in the heart of a boy still learning the cruelty of the world. Chapter 7. The First Bride. When Temujin was 9 years old, before his father's death, Yasuge had secured him a betrothal with a girl of the Ongirat tribe. Her name was Berte, daughter of Dei Sechen, a man of wisdom and influence. Yasuge's death delayed the marriage, but tradition bound the promise. Years later, when Temujin came of age, he rode to claim his bride. Berta was tall, with keen eyes and a quiet strength that matched his own. Unlike others, she did not look at him as a boy scarred by hardship. She saw the steel in him. Their union was more than personal, it was political. The Ongirat alliance gave Temujin much-needed allies, and for the first time since his exile, he felt the ground steady beneath his feet. But happiness on the steppe was fragile. One night enemies struck. The Merkits, sworn foes of Yasuge's line, raided Temujin's camp. They burned, plundered, and seized Berta. Temujin watched in anguish as she was carried away, her cries echoing in the dark. For days he rode, searching, his heart a storm. To lose Berta was to lose not only love, but honor. He turned to Jamuka, his anda, and begged for aid. Together they gathered warriors, a ragged band of riders armed with determination more than wealth. With fire in their eyes and vengeance in their hearts, they pursued the Merkits. In a battle of dust and fury, Temujin struck like a hawk. He cut through the enemy camp, freed Berta, and carried her back to safety. She clung to him, her face pale but resolute. From that day onward, Berta was not merely his wife. She was his partner, his counselor, his empress in all but name. Through every storm that would come, she stood at his side. Chapter 8. Brothers in Spirit. In the seasons that followed, Temujin's bond with Jamuka deepened. They rode together across the endless grass, sharing hunts, battles, and dreams. One evening, as they rested beneath the stars, Jamuka turned to him. "Brother," he said, using the word anda, "the steppe is divided. Tribe against tribe, blood against blood. We could change that. Together, we could unite them." Temujin nodded slowly. "Yes, but not through fear alone. Fear fades, loyalty endures. We must bind men with trust." Jamuka laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "You are too serious, Temujin. Men follow strength. Give them glory, and they will kneel." They spoke late into the night, their voices carrying into the wind. At that time, they were brothers in spirit, dreaming of a world they would one day shape. But the steppe does not permit two suns to rise in the same sky. The day would come when their brotherhood would shatter, and the plains would run red with the blood of their rivalry. Chapter 9. The wolf cub grows. Temujin's name spread quietly at first, carried by whispers among the tribes. Men spoke of a young warrior who rewarded loyalty, who punished betrayal without hesitation, who did not play favorites among the nobility. "Follow Temujin," some said, "and you will be judged by your deeds, not your father's name." To the proud aristocrats of the steppe, this was dangerous talk. But to the poor, to the outcast, to the men who had nothing but their bow and courage, it was salvation. His band of followers grew. No longer just a family struggling to survive, they became a small but disciplined force. Temujin enforced strict rules. No man was to steal from another. No man was to take a woman against her will. Spoils of battle were divided fairly. Such laws were unheard of among the nomads who had long lived by the whims of chiefs. To some, Temujin was a rebel. To others, he was a savior. But to all, he was becoming something greater than a mere wolf cub. He was growing into the wolf himself, with eyes fixed on the horizon and hunger in his heart. Chapter 10. A Sky Without End. One evening, Temujin rode alone across the steppe. The grass whispered beneath his horse's hooves. The sky stretched wide and blue above him. He thought of his father, poisoned and gone. He thought of his mother, her strength holding their family together. He thought of Berta, who had suffered but endured. He lifted his face to the endless sky, the eternal blue heaven, worshipped by his people. "Father Sky," he whispered, I was born with blood in my hand. Let me carve my destiny with it. Let me be the rider who unites the tribes, who binds them like arrows in a quiver. Alone, each arrow snaps. Together, they cannot be broken. The wind answered, sweeping across the plains, carrying with it the distant howl of wolves. The boy named Temujin was no longer merely a child of hardship. He was becoming a man of destiny. The steppe would soon tremble beneath his name. Chapter 11. The Taste of Hunger. The steppe was both cradle and curse. It gave grass for the herds, rivers for the fish, wide skies for the hawks. Yet for the abandoned children of Holon, it gave mostly hunger. Temujin never forgot the taste of emptiness. His stomach gnawed at him in the long winters when snow buried the land, and they had nothing but scraps of frozen meat or thin broth made from boiling bones. He remembered crouching beside his brothers, eyes burning with smoke, as his mother roasted a single strip of rabbit flesh. She cut it into pieces so small that each child's portion barely covered a fingertip. Kassar, ever restless, grumbled, "It is not enough. I could eat 10 rabbits and still be hungry." Holon's eyes flashed. "Do not complain. Do you think the eternal blue sky will fill your belly? We live because we endure. Remember that." Temujin listened, silent. He took his small piece and chewed slowly, savoring every fiber. That night, as he lay awake beneath the thin furs, he whispered to himself, "I will not live like this forever. I will find a way to make hunger fear me instead of the other way around." Chapter 12. The River Test. When spring returned, the brothers sought to prove themselves. Temujin was still slight of frame compared to others his age, but his will was iron. One afternoon, Kassar challenged him. "Let us race across the Kurlan River," he said. "The one who climbs the far bank first is the stronger." The water was icy with snow melt, rushing fast. The brothers stripped to their tunics and dove in. The cold bit like knives, stealing their breath. Kassar thrashed furiously, his strokes wide and powerful. Temujin swam steadily, conserving his strength, pushing against the current with calm persistence. Halfway across, Kassar's strength faltered. The current dragged him under. He sputtered, gasped, and clawed at the water. Temujin spun, seized his arm, and hauled him upward. Together they reached the far bank, both coughing, both shivering. Kassar laughed through chattering teeth. "You won, brother. You saved me. You are the stronger." Temujin shook his head. "Strength is nothing without control. We must endure the water as we endure the steppe, with patience, not rage." Holon, who had watched from the bank, nodded in approval. Temujin learns well. Chapter 13. The Arrow of Blood. Among the Borjigin, boys became men through the bow. To hunt, to defend the herd, to wage war, all required skill with the arrow. Temujin crafted his first bow from birchwood and sinew. It was small, rough, but in his hands, it felt alive. He spent hours practicing, setting clay pots upon stones and shooting until his fingers bled. One evening, while hunting marmots, he loosed an arrow that struck true. The animal squealed, its blood staining the grass. Temujin stood over it, his chest heaving. Kassar grinned. "You are a hunter now, brother." But Temujin stared at the marmot's still body. He felt no joy, only a strange heaviness in his chest. That night he lay awake, thinking of the life he had taken. It was not guilt, exactly. It was understanding. Life was fragile, and the bow made him master of it. That knowledge was both a burden and a weapon. In years to come, he would loose arrows that felled kings and empires, but the memory of that first kill would linger like a scar across his soul. Chapter 14. The quarrel renewed. Bekter, the elder half-brother, grew resentful of Temujin's rising authority. He mocked him in front of the others, boasting of his strength and seniority. One evening, when Holon divided a meager catch of fish, Bekter seized more than his share. Temujin's eyes hardened. "Those belong to us all. You take too much." Bekter sneered. "And who made you chief, little wolf cub? You are nothing without father's name." The words cut deep, but Temujin said nothing. Later, under the pale moon, he whispered to Kassar, "He will break us. He must be stopped." The brothers ambushed Bektor on the steppe, arrows drawn. The fight was brief, brutal. When Bektor fell, silence swept over them. Kassar trembled. What will mother say? Temujin's face was stone. A wolf pack cannot follow two leaders. Better one death than the ruin of us all. Holin's grief was bitter when she learned. She tore her hair, her wails carrying across the camp. "You are my sons, and yet you kill each other like strangers." But Temujin did not waver. In his heart, he knew it had to be done. It was his first taste of blood spilled not for survival, but for power, and it would not be the last. Chapter 15. Shackled. The Taichiud came with fury. Their horsemen thundered over the plain, their banners snapping in the wind. Temujin's family, still weak and few, could not resist. He was seized, his arms bound, his neck locked in a heavy wooden kang. The weight bowed his shoulders, forcing him to stumble as they dragged him through the enemy camp. Children laughed and threw stones. Warriors mocked. "This is the son of Yesugei? This is the cub who thinks himself a wolf?" Temujin's body ached, but his gaze never lowered. Even in chains, his spirit stood tall. At night, they tethered him by the river, leaving him helpless. The moon silvered the water, and Temujin whispered to it, "I will not break. You may bind my body, but not my will." One guard, moved by his courage, pitied him. He loosened the lock. Temujin seized the chance, slipping into the dark. The Kangway dragged at him, heavy as stone, but he waded into the river, hiding among the reeds. The horsemen searched, their torches blazing, but the boy was gone. The river carried him away, and with it, the chains of his captivity. The wolf cub had tasted shackles and broken free. Chapter 16. Blood Brothers. After his escape from the Taichiud, Temujin wandered with only a few loyal companions. His world was narrow: survival, hunting, protecting his mother and younger brothers. But fate brought him back to Jamuka, the noble youth with fire in his eyes. They greeted one another as if no time had passed. Jamuka, mounted upon a fine horse, grinned. "So, the wolf cub lives. I thought the Taichiud had swallowed you." Temujin returned the smile faintly. "A wolf in chains is still a wolf, and wolves bite through iron when the time comes." That night, they renewed their bond. The ritual of Anda was solemn, older than memory. They exchanged gifts, swore oaths, and drank the sacred mare's milk together. "You and I," Jamuka declared, "are two bodies with one soul. Together, we will unite the tribes. Together we will ride the steppe as lords." Temujin clasped his arm. "Yes, but we must not rule like our fathers, who let pride and greed tear the clans apart. We must rule with fairness, with loyalty, with law." Jamuka's eyes flickered. He agreed, but his heart leaned more toward glory than justice. For now, they were brothers. But the eternal blue sky had other plans. Chapter 17. Berta's Return. With Jamuka's help, Temujin grew stronger. He gained warriors, he gained horses, and he gained confidence. At last, he rode to the Ongirat, where his betrothed waited. Berta had grown into a woman of quiet dignity, her gaze sharp as a blade. Daiseken, her father, welcomed Temujin warmly. "Yesugei's son honors his promise. Berta shall be your wife." The marriage feast was humble but joyous. Berta and Temujin sat side by side, sharing fermented mare's milk, their hands brushing together shyly. That night, beneath the felt roof of their tent, they whispered their first vows as husband and wife. Yet happiness on the steppe was always fleeting. Chapter 18. The Night Raid. The Merkits, old enemies of Temujin's father, still thirsted for vengeance. When they heard of the marriage, they struck with fury. In the dark of night, their riders descended upon Temujin's camp. Horses screamed, fires were trampled, men fell in confusion. Berta was seized, dragged away, her cries cutting through the chaos. Temujin fought like a madman, but he was outnumbered. When the dust cleared, his camp lay in ruins, and his bride was gone. He sat in the ashes, trembling with rage. "They will pay," he whispered. "If it takes my life, I will bring her back." Chapter 19. The rescued Temujin turned to Jamuka and to his sworn allies. Together they gathered a force, not large but fierce, bound by loyalty to their young leader. They rode with the swiftness of hawks. Across rivers, through forests, over plains they pursued the Merkits. Temujin's heart was a storm, every hoofbeat pounding with fury. At last they struck. Arrows darkened the sky, swords flashed, horses crashed together in a storm of dust and blood. Temujin carved a path through the enemy camp, his blade red, his cry a roar. He found Berta, pale but unbroken, and lifted her onto his horse. "You are mine," he said fiercely. "No one will ever take you from me again." The Merkits scattered, their camp burned. Berta returned to his side, shaken but steadfast. Together, they rode back into the dawn. Chapter 20. A Leader's Path. The rescue of Berta was more than personal triumph. It was the first true campaign of Temujin's life, the first victory that announced his name to the steppe. Men began to whisper, "He is more than Yesugei's son. He is Temujin, the wolf who endures, the hawk who strikes." Followers gathered. Some were poor men tired of being crushed by their lords. Some were warriors eager for plunder. Some were simply drawn to his aura, his quiet authority, his fairness in dividing spoils, his ruthless justice against betrayal. Temujin set rules for his growing band. Loot would be divided evenly. Women were not to be taken by force. Loyalty mattered more than noble birth. It was unlike anything the steppe had known. The old chiefs ruled with favoritism and cruelty. Temujin ruled with discipline and law. To his enemies, it was dangerous. To his followers, it was hope. Chapter 21. The Eternal Sky. One night, Temujin rode alone. The grassland spread before him like a sea. The stars glittered above like the eyes of gods. He halted his horse and dismounted, kneeling on the earth. He raised his hands to the sky. "Eternal blue heaven," he whispered. "I was born clutching blood. I have seen hunger, betrayal, chains. I have spilled the blood of kin, and I have carried the woman I love from fire. I am no longer a boy. I am Temujin. Guide me. Make me your sword." The wind swept over the steppe, strong and cold. Somewhere, a wolf howled. Temujin rose and mounted his horse. His gaze burned with certainty. The child of hardship was gone. In his place rode a leader, untested still, but destined. The steppe trembled with the first echoes of a name that would one day resound across the world. Genghis Khan. Book 2. The Wolf Cub Rises. Chapter 1. Brothers in Arms. Temujin and Jamuka rode side by side, their banners snapping in the wind. The Anda oath still bound them, two bodies with one soul. Their combined following swelled to tens of thousands, a great host unmatched by any single tribe in living memory. At night, they shared fires, speaking of dreams. Jamuka's voice was bold, filled with ambition. "Why should we bow to the weak Khans of the steppe? Why should we fight their petty wars for scraps of pasture? The sky itself has stretched wide to make room for us. We must seize it." Temujin listened, his eyes steady. "Yes, but we must hold what we seize. The tribes will not follow us if we rule as tyrants. We must give them order, so that loyalty is stronger than fear." Jamuka laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "Always the thoughtful one, but the wolf takes what he wants. That is enough." They were brothers, but already their paths diverged. Chapter 2. The Fracture. The tension grew slowly, like ice cracking on a river. Jamuka favored the nobles, giving wealth and wives to those of high birth. Temujin favored merit, raising even shepherds to command if they proved loyal. One evening, around the fire, Temujin's men murmured. Jamuka bleeds us dry for the sake of his lords. Temujin shares the spoils fairly. Why should we serve both? The next morning, Temujin made a choice. He parted ways with Jamuka, taking a third of the host with him. It was a quiet sundering of the oath, though neither man spoke the words aloud. Jamuka watched him ride away, his face unreadable. In his heart, betrayal had already taken root. Chapter 3. The White Bones. Jamuka struck first. With 30,000 horsemen, he descended upon Temujin's camp, which held scarcely 20,000. The battle raged across the plain, dust and arrows choking the sky. Temujin's men fought with desperate valor, but Jamuka's numbers overwhelmed them. When the slaughter ended, Jamuka showed no mercy. He captured 70 of Temujin's warriors and executed them by boiling, a punishment so cruel it sent shockwaves across the steppe. Temujin escaped with only a fraction of his force. As he rode through the night, the cries of his fallen men echoed in his mind. He swore a vow. Never again will I be so unprepared. Never again will I trust blindly. I will build something stronger than blood oaths. I will build a nation. Chapter 4. The Khan of Justice Temujin rebuilt in the shadows of defeat. He gathered the broken, the betrayed, the poor herdsmen who longed for fairness. Slowly, carefully, he forged a new following. His laws were harsh but clear. Theft was punished swiftly, no matter the thief's rank. Spoils of war were divided evenly. Loyalty was rewarded above all else. These rules gave him a reputation unlike any other chief. Men began to call him not just Temujin, but Khan, a leader chosen not by birth, but by merit. Jamuka ruled by fear. Temujin ruled by justice. The difference spread like fire across the steppe. Chapter 5. Wolves and Sheep. The Taichiud, the Jadaran, the Uruut. Many tribes shifted allegiance. Some joined Temujin, weary of Jamuka's cruelty. Others opposed him, fearing his rise. Temujin's camp became a place of strange equality. A blacksmith might command a dozen riders. A shepherd might feast beside a noble. Berti, now his wife and advisor, encouraged him to keep this system. If you give men hope, they will give you their lives in return. Temujin nodded. Then let hope be our weapon. Chapter 6. Blood on the Onan. The rivalry between Temujin and Jamuka erupted once more by the Onan River. This time, Temujin's forces were disciplined, divided into units of 10, 100, 1,000. The clash was brutal. Arrows darkened the sky, lances shattered, horses screamed. Temujin's men moved like parts of a machine, striking with precision while Jamuka's warriors fought in a chaotic frenzy. By dusk, the field was his. Jamuka fled with the remnants of his host, his pride shattered. Temujin stood upon the riverbank, his sword red, his chest heaving. The wolf cub had risen. He was no longer prey. Chapter 7. The Shadow of Betrayal. Though Jamuka fled, his shadow lingered. Scouts brought word that he wandered the steppe with the scraps of his once mighty host, brooding and nursing hatred. Berta warned her husband, "He is not finished. A wounded wolf bites deepest. Do not think him broken." Temujin nodded. "I know. His spirit burns with pride. He will not rest until he strikes again. But next time, I will be ready." He spent long nights planning, carving strategies into the dirt with a stick, explaining them to his captains. Our strength is not in numbers, but in order. Each man must know his place, his duty, and never break from it. That is how a small force breaks a large one. His captains listened, their eyes shining. They had never heard such precision from a Khan before. Chapter 8. The Law of the Steppe. Temujin summoned his followers and declared new laws. These were not mere customs but binding rules, enforced with ruthless consistency. No man may take a horse without permission, even in hunger or need. Women are to be protected, not taken as plunder. No family is left without protection. Widows and orphans belong to the tribe as a whole. Each warrior is part of a unit, 10, 100, 1,000, bound together like bones in a body. One man who stole from his comrade was brought before Temujin. The thief expected leniency, for he was of noble blood. Temujin's eyes were hard as flint. You knew the law, you broke it. The thief was executed, his blood staining the ground. Whispers rippled through the camp. Temujin spares no one, not even the highborn. Fear mingled with respect. The tribe grew stronger. Chapter 9. The Gathering Storm. Temujin's banner drew men like moths to flame. Tribes once scattered by feuds now found order beneath his rule. Still, whispers carried across the grasslands. Jamuka prepares to strike again. One evening, Temujin's scouts returned breathless. Jamuka has gathered 30,000 men. He marches west, and his banners are many. Temujin's host numbered perhaps 20,000. He gathered his captains beneath the stars. We cannot match him in numbers, Temujin said, his voice low but steady. But we can break him in spirit. His men fight for plunder. Ours fight for justice. That will be our strength. Chapter 10. The Battle of Dalan Balzut. The two hosts clashed near Dalan Balzut. Dust rose in choking clouds as tens of thousands of hooves pounded the steppe. Arrows fell like rain. Temujin's men fought in disciplined ranks, their units moving with deadly coordination. Jamuka's warriors surged with wild fury, fearless but chaotic. For hours the battle swayed. At last, Temujin unleashed his reserve, 1,000 fresh riders who thundered into Jamuka's flank. The enemy broke. Jamuka fled once more, his banners torn, his army scattered. But this time, the defeat was crushing. His aura of invincibility was gone. Chapter 11. The Spoils of Victory. When the field was won, Temujin gathered the survivors. He did not allow his men to plunder freely. Instead, he ordered the spoils divided evenly. One warrior protested. But I took this with my own hands. Why should I share? Temujin fixed him with a piercing gaze. Because we are one body. If the hand keeps what the stomach needs, the body dies. If you would live as a wolf, live alone. If you would live as a man, share as a brother. The murmurs ceased. For the first time, the warriors of the steppe tasted the strength of true order. Chapter 12. The captives among the captives were nobles who had once mocked Temujin as a mere orphan. They knelt before him, trembling. What will you do with us? One asked. Temujin's voice was calm. You may live, if you serve faithfully. But betray me, and I will show no mercy. Some pledged loyalty, grateful for their lives. Others refused and were executed. Word spread quickly. Temujin was fair, but merciless to the faithless. Chapter 13. The Seeds of Destiny, or... With Jamuka broken and many tribes bending the knee, Temujin's power swelled. Yet he did not rush to proclaim himself supreme. He knew the steppe was still divided, its rival clans circling like wolves. Instead, he built patiently. He taught his men to fight not as scattered raiders but as one body. He wove his laws into their lives until they became habit, stronger than blood ties. At night, he rode with Berta across the moonlit plain. She spoke softly. Already they whisper your name with awe. One day, they will call you more than Khan. They will call you ruler of all. Temujin looked up at the stars. If that day comes, it will not be for my name alone. It will be for the law, for the order that keeps the steppe from tearing itself apart. Chapter 14. The fading brother Jamuka wandered the steppe like a shadow of his former self. Once, he had been the golden youth, the dreamer with fire in his eyes. Now his campfires were small, his men few, his pride wounded. Yet pride dies hard. He still muttered to his followers, Temujin betrayed me. He stole my warriors, my glory. One day I will repay him. But more and more of his companions slipped away, choosing Temujin's law over Jamuka's chaos. The bond of Anda had long since broken, and in its place grew a hatred as cold as iron. Chapter 15. A Council of Tribes. Temujin summoned the chiefs of allied clans to a great Kurultai on the banks of the Onon. Hundreds of felt tents dotted the plain, smoke rising in pillars as horses grazed on the fresh grass. The chiefs came wary, some hostile, others curious. They remembered Temujin as a boy abandoned on the steppe, yet here he stood, tall and steady, with warriors in ordered ranks behind him. He addressed them with measured words. "You know me as Yesuge's son, as Temujin who has suffered hunger, chains, and betrayal. You know I am no stranger to hardship. But you also know I keep my word. Under my banner, the poor are protected, the strong are rewarded, and justice is the same for all." He raised his hand. "If the tribes remain divided, we will forever be prey for our enemies, the Tatars, the Merkits, the Jin to the south. But if we are one, no power can stand against us," the chiefs murmured, weighing his words. Some bowed their heads in agreement. Others muttered that no man could unite the steppe. But the seed was planted. Chapter 16. The Fall of Jamuka. Jamuka's last strike came desperate and bitter. With the remnants of his force, he attempted a raid against Temujin's allies, hoping to rekindle old loyalties. But Temujin's scouts were swift. His forces encircled Jamuka like a tightening noose. The battle was brief. Jamuka's men surrendered in droves, unwilling to die for a master who offered nothing but pride. At last, Jamuka himself was captured. They brought him bound before Temujin. The two former brothers looked upon each other in silence. Jamuka spoke first. "You have won, wolf cub. But know this, the steppe bows only to strength. If you falter, they will tear you apart as they tore me." Temujin's eyes softened, though his voice was firm. "Once we were Anda. Once I believed we could rule together. But you chose cruelty. You lost not to me, but to yourself. Jamuka requested a noble death, without the spilling of blood. Temujin granted it, allowing him to die with honor. His body was laid upon the open plain, exposed to the eternal blue sky. The last shadow of Temujin's youth was gone. Chapter 17. The Banner of the Nine Tails. After Jamuka's fall, the momentum was unstoppable. Tribes flocked to Temujin's banner. His laws brought stability, his discipline brought victories, and his fairness brought loyalty. At a great Kurultai, the gathered chiefs raised him upon a white felt carpet and proclaimed him Khan. Drums thundered, horsemen shouted, and a new banner was unfurled, a tall spear adorned with 9 white horsetails. This was the Sulda, the sacred standard of leadership. Temujin knelt beneath it, his face solemn. "I am no longer just Temujin," he declared. "I am Khan of the Mongols. But I do not claim this for myself alone. I claim it for all who serve under the eternal blue sky, who keep the law, who ride not for greed, but for unity. Together, we will make the steppe one." The cry rose from thousands of throats. "Khan! Khan! Khan!" Chapter 18. The First Trials of Rule. But to be Khan was not to be at peace. Leadership brought new burdens. Disputes flared between tribes, old grudges simmered, and the enemies beyond the steppe, Tatars to the east, Merkits to the north, the Jin Empire to the south, watched with wary eyes. Temujin spent long nights in council with Berta. She urged patience. "Do not seek conquest too soon. First, bind the tribes so tightly that no blade can sever them." He agreed. He traveled among his followers, hearing grievances, enforcing laws, rewarding loyalty. He was no distant lord. He was present, visible, a Khan who shared in their hardships. This built trust stronger than iron. Chapter 19. The Tatar Blood Debt. One enemy, however, could not be ignored. The Tatars. They had poisoned his father years ago, setting Temujin's whole life upon its harsh path. He gathered his men. "The eternal blue sky has given us strength. Now it is time to settle the blood debt. The Tatars will answer for my father's death." The warriors roared their approval. The campaign was swift and merciless. Temujin's army struck the Tatars with precision, scattering them across the plains. Captives were taken, their chiefs executed. As Temujin watched the smoke rise from the enemy camp, he whispered, "Father, your son has avenged you. May your spirit rest." Chapter 20. The Wolf Becomes Khan. With victory over the Tatars, Temujin's name spread beyond the steppe. To friend and foe alike, he was no longer merely Temujin. He was a Khan shaped by hardship, hardened by betrayal, and sharpened by justice. But in his heart, he knew this was only the beginning. The steppe was vast, the tribes many, the empires beyond powerful. He had forged unity from scraps, but to keep it, he would need more than law. He would need vision. One night, beneath the endless stars, he murmured to Berta, "I was born clutching blood. Perhaps it was a sign. I was destined to fight all my life. But if I succeed, our sons will inherit not war, but a nation." She touched his hand gently. "Then ride on, my wolf. The sky is wide, and it waits for you." Chapter 21. The Weight of the Carpet. When the chiefs lifted Temujin upon the white felt carpet, his heart thundered like hooves across the plain. He felt the eyes of thousands upon him, warriors, women, children, elders. Some looked with reverence, others with doubt. That night, in the quiet of his tent, Berta found him pacing. "You look as though you bear a burden too heavy to carry," she said. Temujin turned to her, his brow furrowed. "They have named me Khan, but I know too well how fragile such titles are. One raid, one betrayal, and they will scatter like leaves. I must not only be Khan, I must be the law itself." Berta smiled softly. "Then be both wolf and shepherd. Lead with strength, guard with fairness. They will follow because they need you, not because they fear you." He touched her hand. "You see more clearly than I. Perhaps the eternal sky gave you to me for this purpose." Chapter 22. The Law Tested. Not long after his enthronement, a dispute erupted between two clans over stolen horses. Both sides claimed justice, both threatened bloodshed. Temujin summoned them to his camp. "Bring the horses," he commanded. The beasts were led forth, their brands still visible. Temujin studied them, then questioned the herders. His judgment was swift. The horses were returned to their rightful owner, and the thief, a nobleman's son, was executed. Gasps rippled through the gathering. Never before had a Khan slain one of noble blood for the sake of common justice. Temujin raised his voice. "Hear me well. Under my rule, the law is iron. No man's blood is worth more than another's. If we are to be one people, then justice must be blind to birth." That day, his authority hardened into something greater than fear. It became trust. Chapter 23. The Murmurs of Dissent. Not all were pleased. Some chiefs muttered that Temujin was too harsh, too rigid. One elder whispered to another, "He kills nobles like thieves, divides spoils like a merchant. Is this a Khan or a tyrant?" Rumors reached Temujin's ears. He did not ignore them. Instead, he called the dissenters to a feast. Meat was roasted, mares were milked, songs were sung. At the height of the gathering, Temujin rose and spoke. "I do not claim to be perfect, but I tell you this. Without order, the steppe devours itself. Would you rather see your children starve while nobles hoard wealth? Would you rather see widows abandoned while chiefs grow fat? If that is the way, then kill me now, and choose another Khan." The silence was heavy. No man moved. At last, one stood and bowed. "You speak truth. Better a Khan of iron than none at all." The murmurs faded. Chapter 24. Berta's Wisdom. Berta proved more than a wife. She was an advisor, a voice of calm in Temujin's storm. When warriors clamored for greater raids, she counseled patience. "Do not let their hunger for plunder set your course. A Khan who rides at the whim of his men is no Khan at all." When jealousies flared among Temujin's brothers, she reminded him, "Family can be your strongest shield or your deepest wound. Do not let ambition tear you apart as it tore Jamukha." Her presence steadied him. Around the fires, women began to whisper that Berta was not just a Khatun, but a queen in all but name. Chapter 25. The Sons of Temujin. In time, Berta bore Temujin's sons, Yochi, Chagatai, Ogadei, Tolui. Their cries filled the camp, and their tiny fists grasped at the air as though already reaching for reins and bows. Temujin looked upon them with pride, but also unease. They are my blood, yet I fear what blood breeds. Will they be wolves that hunt together, or wolves that tear at each other's throats? Berta answered, that will depend on what kind of world you build for them. If you leave them only chaos, they will fight. If you leave them a nation, they will guard it. Her words struck deep, echoing in his heart for years to come. Chapter 26. The Fire in the South. Whispers came from beyond the steppe. The Jin dynasty to the south, rulers of vast cities and golden palaces, had begun to take notice of Temujin's rise. Some envoys came with gifts, others with threats. Temujin told his council, "We are not yet ready to face the south. The steppe must be made whole before we challenge the walls of cities. But know this, the day will come when our horses drink from the rivers of China." The men laughed, some in disbelief, others in excitement. But Temujin's gaze was steady. He was already thinking beyond the horizon. Chapter 27. The Oath of the People. At the close of a great Kurultai, Temujin stood before his people and raised the 9-tailed banner high. Once I was a boy abandoned on the steppe, left to die. I survived because my mother taught me endurance. I rose because my brothers fought at my side. I became Khan because you followed me when others betrayed me. But this is not the end. This is the beginning. We are no longer scattered tribes. We are one people. Swear it now, that you will live and die together under the eternal blue sky. 1,000 voices roared in reply. The oath rolled across the grassland like thunder. Temujin lowered his head, feeling the weight of destiny settle upon his shoulders. The wolf cub had grown. Now he was a wolf leading the pack. Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. The steppes stretched endless beneath the eternal blue sky, but they were not yet whole. The Taichi-ud still resisted, bitter from their old feud. The Naiman held sway in the west, their warriors proud and numerous. The Merkits lingered, vengeful as ever. Temujin sat with his generals by the fire. The 9-tailed banner cast long shadows in the night wind. "We have been named Khan," he said, his voice low but firm. "But a title means little while rivals defy us. If we are to be more than one clan among many, we must break them, not scatter them, but bind them to us. A Khan without unity is a shepherd without a flock." His men nodded. They had seen what unity meant: justice, discipline, spoils shared fairly. But they also knew the blood it would cost. Chapter 2. The Taichi-ud Reckoning. The first blow fell upon the Taichi-ud. For years they had been Temujin's tormentors, capturing him in youth, binding him in chains. Now the wolf returned to their door. His army rode swift and relentless, surrounding their camp before dawn. The Taichi-ud fought fiercely, their arrows hissing like angry snakes, but Temujin's discipline carried the day. Units of 10, 100, 1,000 moved as one, outflanking and crushing the enemy. When the battle ended, Temujin called forth the survivors. Some begged for mercy, some spat curses. He raised his voice so all could hear. "You called me slave, chained me like a beast. Yet today I offer you this. Join me and be Mongols. Defy me and vanish." Many bent the knee. Those who would not were executed without hesitation. The Taichi-ud name faded into the growing body of Temujin's people. Chapter 3. The Law of Iron. As more tribes fell under his banner, Temujin codified his laws into what would be remembered as the Yasa. Every man owed loyalty first to his unit, then to the Khan. Every family owed care to the widows and orphans of their kin. No man might conceal another's crime. Hunting during breeding season was forbidden, so the herds might flourish. Betrayal was punished by death, regardless of rank or blood. The laws spread faster than the sword. Chiefs who joined Temujin found their men growing disciplined, their camps more secure, their plunder more abundant. What had once seemed harsh now proved wise. Chapter 4. The Naiman Threat. In the west, the Naiman watched uneasily. Their khans boasted of their strength, claiming they alone could match Temujin's rise. Envoys came with haughty words. You call yourself Khan, but the steppe already has khans enough. Submit to the Naiman or face ruin. Temujin answered calmly. A wolf does not bow to a fat dog, no matter how loudly it barks. If the Naiman wish to test us, let them ride. The eternal blue sky will decide. The war drums began to beat. Chapter 5. Betrayal among brothers. Not all threats came from without. Within his own kin, ambition stirred. His half-brothers, Belgute and Kassar, loyal as they were, sometimes clashed over authority. Others whispered that Yochi, Temujin's firstborn, carried the blood of Borta's captors, the Merkits, and thus might not be his true son. Temujin silenced such whispers harshly. Yochi is my son. To question him is to question me, and to question me is to betray the Mongols. But in his heart, the doubt gnawed at him. He loved Yochi, yet the shadow of uncertainty never left. It was a wound that would fester in years to come. Chapter 6. The Merkits' Last Stand. The Merkits struck once more, raiding villages and stealing horses. Temujin would not tolerate it. He gathered his warriors and rode against them with fire in his eyes. The campaign was merciless. The Merkits were hunted through forests and rivers. Their camps burned, their leaders slain. Those who survived were absorbed into Temujin's ranks, their tribal identity dissolved. At last, the enemy who had stolen Berta, who had haunted his youth with shame and rage, was gone. When the smoke cleared, Borta rode at his side. You have broken them, husband. The past is avenged. Temujin nodded, though his gaze was distant. Yes, but vengeance is not enough. The steppe must be more than ashes. Chapter 7. The Birth of a Nation. One by one, the tribes bent to his will. Some through fear, others through loyalty, still others because Temujin's laws offered something they had never known. Stability. At a great Kurultai, the chiefs of many clans swore allegiance. Temujin stood tall before them, the nine-tailed banner rising above his head. Once we were many tribes, scattered and weak. Now we are one people. From this day forth, we are not Taichi-ud, not Merkits, not Naiman. We are Mongols. The cry resounded across the plain. Mongols! Mongols! It was more than a name. It was the birth of a nation. Chapter 8. The Naiman Advance. The Naiman moved like a tide from the western steppe, banners snapping in the wind, their warriors countless as grass stalks. Their Khan, Taiyang, rode at the head, confident in his numbers. Temujin is nothing but a gatherer of scraps, Taiyang boasted. We are the west wind, and we will blow his flimsy fire to ash. Temujin, hearing of their approach, did not flinch. He called his generals, Kassar, Subutai, Jelme, Jebe, and laid stones upon the ground to represent armies. We are fewer, he admitted. But they are many chiefs, many voices. Their strength is scattered. We will strike like the wolf. Fast, coordinated, united. They will drown in their own confusion. Chapter 9. The Battle of Chakirmaut. The two forces met on the plain of Chakirmaut. The Naiman ranks stretched wide, their drums thundering, their banners blotting the horizon. Temujin's men stood steady in their formations of tens, hundreds, thousands. Orders carried swiftly down the lines, discipline unbroken. The battle raged for days. Clouds of arrows darkened the sky, horses crashed into one another, blades flashed in the dust. At last, Temujin unleashed his secret weapon, feigned retreat. His center broke and fled, luring the Naiman into pursuit. As they surged forward in triumph, Mongol wings wheeled in from the flanks, encircling them like jaws snapping shut. By nightfall, the Naiman host was shattered. Their Khan fled, only to die in the mountains. When the dust cleared, Temujin rode the field, his eyes grim. Let the world see. No tribe is beyond the reach of unity. Those who resist will break. Those who join will thrive. Chapter 10. The Uyghur Alliance. In the aftermath, envoys came from the Uyghurs of the West. They brought gifts of silk, grain, and scribes skilled in writing. Their leader bowed before Temujin. We are traders, not warriors. Yet we see which way the wind blows. Better to stand with you than against you. Accept our allegiance, and our knowledge of letters, trade, and governance will be yours. Temujin accepted gladly. He had long understood that power was not only the bow and the blade, but also the pen and the scroll. With Uyghur scribes, he began recording laws and orders in writing, binding his rule more firmly than ever before. Chapter 11. The Spirit of the Sky. In the quiet after victory, Temujin climbed a lonely hill beneath the stars. Alone he knelt and raised his hands to the heavens. Eternal blue sky, hear me. I was born into hardship. I have been a slave, a fugitive, a hunted wolf. Yet you have spared me again and again. If it is your will, then grant me strength not for myself, but for the people who now call themselves Mongols. Let me forge them into something that endures. The wind stirred, carrying with it the cry of an eagle. Temujin rose, his heart certain that the sky had answered. Chapter 12. The Challenge of the Karaits. The Karaits, once powerful allies, began to waver. Their Khan, Ong, had supported Temujin in the past, but jealousy crept in as Temujin's power eclipsed his own. Whispers grew. Temujin would be Khan of all, leaving nothing for Ong. War was inevitable. The clash came swift and brutal. Ong Khan's forces broke beneath the disciplined Mongol advance. Betrayed by his own men, Ong fled into the night, only to be slain by hunters who did not even know who he was. Temujin's heart was heavy. Once, he had called Ong Khan father. Now, another rival was gone, swallowed by the tide of destiny. Chapter 13. The Trial of Loyalty. Among the prisoners of war was a man of great skill, a commander named Jebe. He had once loosed an arrow that struck Temujin's horse, nearly killing him. When Jebe was brought before him, Temujin asked, "Why should I not kill you for what you did?" Jebe met his gaze without fear. "Because I did it with skill, not malice. I am the archer who struck your horse. If you kill me, I am nothing. If you spare me, I will serve you better than any man alive." Temujin studied him, then nodded. "From this day, you are Jebe, the arrow. Serve me faithfully, and your name will live forever." And so it was. Jebe would become one of his greatest generals. Chapter 14. The Kurultai of Destiny. At last, after years of battle, betrayal, and blood, the tribes of the steppe gathered once more. From the Onan to the Altai, from the Gobi to the forests, chiefs and warriors assembled for the greatest Kurultai yet. Temujin stood before them, the nine-tailed banner blazing in the sun. His voice carried like thunder. "You have seen what unity can do. We have broken the Taichi Ud, the Merkits, the Karaites, the Naiman. No tribe remains that can stand alone, but together, we are strong beyond measure. From this day, we are not many peoples, but one. And I, by your will and by the eternal blue sky, take a new name, Genghis Khan." The crowd roared the name again and again, until it echoed across the plains like rolling thunder. Genghis, Genghis, Genghis! Chapter 15. The Dawn of an Empire. With his enthronement as Genghis Khan, the steppe was no longer a patchwork of tribes. It was a nation, forged by fire and bound by law. Yet even as the Mongols celebrated, Genghis Khan's gaze turned outward. Beyond the horizon lay kingdoms rich and proud. The Jin to the south, the Khwarizm to the west, the lands of the Rus far beyond the forests. To his followers, he spoke simply. The steppe is united. Now the world lies before us. The eternal blue sky has given us this destiny. We will ride until there are no more lands to conquer. His warriors cheered, lifting their bows high. The wolf had become a storm. Book 4. The conqueror. The steppe was no longer divided. The Taichi Oud had been shattered, the Merkits hunted into dust, the Karites dissolved, the Naiman broken, and the scattered remnants of rival clans bound beneath the law of Genghis Khan. His banner of 9 white horsetails rose high above the plains, no longer a mere symbol of one tribe, but of a people reborn. Unity brought peace to the Mongols, but peace was not Genghis Khan's destiny. He had always been a man shaped by struggle, and he knew that an idle people grew weak. The eternal blue sky had granted him strength not to stand still, but to ride forward. To the south lay the vast empire of the Jin, rich with silks, rice, and gold, their walled cities standing like stone mountains across the fertile plains of northern China. To the west stretched the desert, and beyond it the Khwarezmian kingdom, prosperous with trade from Persia and India. To the north and west lay the scattered Rus princes, far off but wealthy in furs and silver. The world was wide, and it called to him. His council gathered in a great circle, generals and kinsmen alike. Khazar, his stalwart brother, urged caution. The tribes are only just bound. If we stretch too far, too fast, the unity we bled for may unravel. Subutai, younger but already a master of war, disagreed. Strength fades when left idle. We must strike now, before the tribes forget the taste of conquest. If we ride south, the spoils will bind them closer than fear ever could. Genghis Khan listened, silent as stone. At last he spoke. The South has always scorned us as barbarians, fit only to raid their borders. The Jin poisoned my father and laughed as our clans tore each other apart. That debt is not yet repaid. We will ride to their gates and show them that the steppe is no longer divided. Scouts were sent, alliances forged. The Uyghurs promised grain and supplies, scribes and interpreters. Blacksmiths worked day and night to forge arrowheads and stirrups, while herders drove vast flocks of sheep and herds of horses to feed the army. The Mongols moved not as scattered raiders, but as an organized force, disciplined and relentless. The first strikes fell upon the Tangut kingdom of Xixia, lying at the desert's edge. Their fortified cities resisted, but the Mongols were inventive. They built siege engines with the help of captured Chinese craftsmen, hurling stones and fire over the walls. When the defenders mocked them as steppe nomads who could never master city warfare, the Mongols answered with silence and patience, encircling the fortresses until hunger did the work of the bow. One by one, the Tangut rulers bent the knee, offering tribute and recognition. Genghis Khan accepted their gifts, but demanded more than gold. He demanded soldiers, supplies, and loyalty. Xixia was not destroyed, but made into a tool, its obedience bought at the price of survival. From Xixia, the Mongols turned east, pressing deeper into Jin lands. Their armies swept across the plains, raiding towns, burning granaries, scattering militias that tried to resist. The Jin commanders, bound by rigid discipline and mistrust of one another, struggled to adapt to the Mongols' speed. Genghis Khan divided his army into tumans, great divisions of 10,000, each capable of moving independently, striking from unexpected directions and rejoining with deadly precision. His generals became legends in their own right. Jebe the arrow, Subutai the strategist, Jelme the loyal companion who had once saved his life, and Khazar, whose bow was said to be stronger than any man's. The Mongols did not fight for plunder alone. Wherever they went, Genghis Khan enforced his law. Loot was distributed fairly, no soldier allowed to enrich himself at the expense of his comrade. Women and children were protected from unnecessary slaughter if they surrendered, but resistance was punished with merciless devastation. To the conquered, the message was clear: submit and live under the law of Genghis Khan, or defy him and be erased. The Jin emperor, desperate, called upon vast armies to repel the invaders. In one campaign, they fielded hundreds of thousands, dwarfing the Mongol host. Yet numbers meant little against discipline and cunning. Genghis Khan feigned retreats, luring the Jin into ambushes. He struck supply lines, forcing them to starve. He divided their armies until they fought one another as much as the Mongols. When the great city of Zhengdu, the Jin capital, finally trembled under siege, its markets emptied, its people starving, The Mongols unleashed wave after wave of attack. Fire tore through its wooden houses, smoke rose into the sky. At last, the gates fell. Genghis Khan rode through streets of ash, his banner casting long shadows upon walls that had once seemed unbreakable. The Jin emperor fled south, abandoning the north to Mongol rule. With the Jin humbled, Genghis Khan returned to Mongolia not to rest, but to rule. The conquered lands were placed under governors, tribute flowing back into the steppe. Grain, silk, craftsmen, and wealth poured into the hands of the Mongols, who had once lived only from their herds. The people began to see that their Khan's vision was not only of conquest, but of permanence. Around the fire one night, Burta asked him, "Will there ever be an end to your riding? You have avenged your father, united the tribes, broken the south. What more does the eternal sky demand of you?" Genghis Khan gazed into the flames, his face unreadable. "The sky has no end, neither does the earth. So long as there are lands beyond our reach, there is more to be done. Our sons will inherit more than a tribe. They will inherit a world." The Mongol Empire was no longer a dream. It was becoming reality, forged in fire, written in law, and carried upon the hooves of 1,000 horses. And yet, this was only the beginning. The conquest of northern China had brought the Mongols wealth and glory, but Genghis Khan's gaze turned westward. Beyond the sands of the Great Desert lay the Khwarezmian Empire, stretching from the Oxus River to Persia, rich with cities, trade routes, and markets that connected the east to the west. Caravans laden with silk and spices crossed its roads, and its Shah, Ala ad-Din Muhammad, ruled proudly from Samarkand and Urgench. To Genghis Khan, the Khwarezmian lands represented not only wealth, but opportunity. He had no wish at first to conquer them. Instead, he sought alliance. If the Khwarezmian Shah would recognize him as a partner, the Mongol Empire could open its doors to the treasures of the Islamic world, and the trade routes would enrich both peoples. For a moment, it seemed peace might bind east and west. Genghis Khan sent envoys with gifts, gold, silk, rare furs, and words of friendship. "Between us lies no quarrel," the letter read, "only the road of trade. Let merchants ride freely from your markets to mine, and from mine to yours, and both our peoples will prosper." But the Shah did not see a partner. He saw a barbarian upstart who, though victorious in China, was to him nothing more than a nomad chieftain unworthy of respect. When the first Mongol caravan arrived at the city of Otrar, its merchants bearing goods and seals of safe passage, the local governor accused them of spying. The goods were seized, the men executed. Genghis Khan, hearing this, did not strike at once. He sent 3 ambassadors directly to the Shah, demanding justice and the punishment of the governor. Instead, the Shah humiliated them. One was executed, the others mutilated, and sent back alive. This was no insult that could be ignored. To kill an ambassador was to spit upon the eternal blue sky itself. Around the fire, Genghis Khan's voice turned cold. "The Shah has chosen to answer friendship with blood. Very well. I offered him alliance. Now I will offer him nothing but destruction." The Mongol army marched west, crossing rivers and deserts, moving with the same speed and discipline that had shattered the tribes of Mongolia and the armies of the Jin. Scouts rode far ahead, spreading confusion, while columns of horsemen struck in multiple directions at once. The Khwarezmian generals, accustomed to slower wars and proud in their numbers, could not match such mobility. City after city fell. Bukhara, jewel of Central Asia, with its grand mosques and schools, opened its gates after brief resistance. Genghis Khan rode into its heart, dismounted, and entered the great mosque. Looking upon the terrified citizens, he spoke, "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." His words spread like fire, remembered long after he left the city in ruins. Samarkand followed, its armies vast, but its commanders divided. The Mongols encircled the city, cutting off its water, bombarding its walls with captured siege engines. After days of resistance, Betrayal opened the gates. The defenders were slaughtered, the survivors enslaved. Craftsmen were spared and sent east to serve the growing Mongol state. Soldiers and nobles were killed without mercy. The Shah fled before the storm, abandoning his people. From city to city he ran, pursued not by armies but by the fear of what was coming. The Mongols split their forces, Jebe and Subutai leading deep raids across the Caspian and into the Caucasus, striking enemies who had never before heard the thunder of Mongol hooves. Villages were erased, fortresses stormed, kingdoms shattered before they could even gather their courage. Urgench, the Shah's capital, resisted fiercely. Its defenders fought from every street, every rooftop. But Mongol discipline and fury could not be denied. The city burned, its canals choked with bodies, its wealth carried away. Chroniclers wrote that the blood ran so thick that it reached the stirrups of the riders, though whether this was truth or legend mattered little. For to the world, the image of Urgench's ruin became a symbol of Mongol wrath. The Shah himself found no refuge. Hounded across the desert, he fled to an island in the Caspian Sea, where he died in despair, abandoned and broken. His son, Jalal ad-Din, tried to rally resistance in Persia, but even he was forced to flee, defeated again and again, until at last he vanished into exile. By the time the campaign ended, the Khwarezmian Empire had ceased to exist. In less than 2 years, Genghis Khan had taken an empire of millions and reduced it to dust. But conquest came at a cost. The Mongols themselves had ridden farther than ever before, across lands strange and harsh, and many did not return. Genghis Khan, though victorious, knew that this was not the end. Beyond Persia lay other kingdoms, and to the south, the Caliph in Baghdad, watching warily. To the west stretched the endless lands of the Rus, and beyond them the powers of Europe, and to the east the Jin still lingered, their emperor hiding in his southern capital. When Genghis Khan returned to Mongolia, he brought not only riches and slaves, but also knowledge. Siege engineers from Persia, maps of lands far beyond the steppe, and an understanding that the world was far larger than any Mongol had imagined. Around his fire, with Borta at his side and his sons gathered near, he spoke of the future. "We have ridden far, but the sky is endless. Our destiny does not end with one empire nor two. The world lies open, waiting. The eternal blue sky has made us as a storm. Until all submit, the storm will not rest." The fire crackled, sparks rising into the night, like the smoke of burning cities carried upon the wind. The Mongols were no longer raiders, no longer merely conquerors of tribes or neighbors. They were now a force that could shake continents, and under Genghis Khan, they would not stop. The Khwarezmian Empire was ash and ruin, its Shah dead in exile, its cities reduced to memory. Across Asia, men spoke the name of Genghis Khan with awe and terror. Yet the storm did not rest. Even as his armies rode home laden with spoils, the Khan turned his gaze once more to the east, to unfinished business. The Tangut kingdom of Shishya, humbled in earlier campaigns, had pledged tribute and soldiers. But while Genghis Khan rode west against the Shah, they had grown restless, withholding aid, doubting that the Mongols would return from such distant wars. To Genghis Khan, this was betrayal. To defy him, after he had accepted their submission, was to insult the very law he had forged. The eternal blue sky demanded retribution. He summoned his generals, his sons, and his trusted companions. The Shah is dead, the West is broken, but Shishya has forgotten its oath. We will remind them that to betray the Mongols is to invite extinction. The army moved once more into the deserts and mountains of the Tangut. City after city fell, its walls breached by the siege engines and engineers the Mongols had carried back from Persia. The defenders fought bravely, but their fate was sealed. Resistance meant slaughter, surrender meant survival. And still many chose resistance. The capital, Ningxia, became the center of the storm. The Mongols encircled it, cutting off all supplies. Siege towers rose, fire arrows rained down, catapults hurled stone and flame. The Tangut emperor pleaded for peace, offering gold, tribute, even his daughter's hand in marriage. Genghis Khan rejected every offer. His wrath was cold and unyielding. They broke faith once. If I leave them, they will break it again. The steppe cannot be bound by oaths that men feel free to break. When Ningxia at last fell, its people were put to the sword. Chroniclers wrote that the kingdom of Xixia vanished from the map, its culture erased, its people scattered. Genghis Khan had not merely conquered them, he had destroyed them, root and branch, as a warning to the world. Yet even as his armies triumphed, his own body began to falter. Age weighed upon him, though he still rode at the head of his tumans. Some whispered that he was wounded in battle, others that a fall from his horse broke his strength, still others that illness gnawed at him after years of unrelenting campaigns. Whatever the truth, the fire that had carried him across continents began to dim. Around his campfires he spoke often with Berta, now silver-haired but still sharp of mind. "I was born into hardship," he told her quietly. "I rose because the sky willed it. But even the greatest rider cannot ride forever. Our sons must carry the storm onward." Berta touched his hand. "They are wolves of your blood, but wolves fight unless they are guided. You must leave them not only lands, but law, so they do not tear apart what you have built." He listened, and in his final years gave great care to succession. Ogadai, his third son, he chose as his heir, for though not the eldest, he was steady, measured, and wise in counsel. To Chagatai he gave lands, but also the duty of upholding law. To Joki, whose birth had always carried whispers of doubt, he offered territory far in the west, though their relationship remained strained. Tolui, the youngest, remained closest, his loyalty unquestioned. In 1227, as the Mongol armies completed their destruction of Xixia, the Khan's health failed. The exact moment of his death is lost to history, hidden by his followers to prevent weakness from showing. Some say he died in his tent, whispering prayers to the eternal blue sky. Others claim he rode into battle one last time and fell with bow in hand. However it happened, when word spread, it was carried in silence, guarded with care. His body was borne north to the sacred Burkhan Khaldun Mountains, where no man outside his most trusted guard would ever see his grave. Horses trampled the earth flat, trees were felled, rivers diverted, so that no trace remained. His burial place became legend, lost to time. Before his passing, he left his generals and sons a vision. "I conquered not for myself, but for the Mongols. I leave you not just lands, but a law, a people, and a destiny. Do not be divided. If you stand together, the world itself will fall beneath your hooves." And so, with his death, the man born Temujin, son of Yasugei, who had once been a boy abandoned on the steppe, became more than a man. He became legend, Genghis Khan, the scourge of God, the unifier of the Mongols, the storm that forever changed the world. The empire he forged did not end with him. His heirs would ride farther still, into Persia, into Russia, into Europe itself. The storm would spread across continents, reshaping history, but the seed of it all lay in the boy who had been born clutching blood, who had endured chains, betrayal, and hunger, and who had risen to command the greatest empire the world had ever known. The eternal blue sky had claimed Genghis Khan, but his empire did not falter. The Kurultai, the great council of Mongol nobles, gathered on the open steppe. From every corner of the empire they came, from the forests of Siberia, from the plains of northern China, from the deserts of Persia. The banners of the clans rippled in the wind, 9 white yak-tails fluttering at the center. There, the decision was made to follow the will of the late Khan. Ogadai, the third son, would succeed. Not the eldest, not the strongest, but the steadiest, chosen because he could bind the family together. Chagatai bristled, quick to anger, demanding his rights as elder. Yoki's line was viewed with suspicion, whispered doubts about his blood still lingering even after his death. Tolui, the youngest, commanded loyalty, but lacked the stature to rule all. But for the sake of unity, they accepted Ogadai, though beneath the surface, tensions remained. Ogadai's first acts as Great Khan were to continue his father's work. The Jin dynasty, though broken, still held their southern capital Kaifeng and refused to submit. Ojide ordered a renewed campaign, pressing deep into their territory. Siege after siege broke their defenses, until at last Kaifeng fell. Its emperor fled, and within a few years, the Jin dynasty ceased to exist. Northern China was Mongol. With the east secured, attention turned westward. The empire's borders stretched across deserts and mountains, touching lands whose rulers had only heard whispers of the Mongols. In Persia, resistance flared, but Tolui led the armies with ruthless efficiency, finishing what his father had begun. Cities that resisted were crushed, their people scattered, while craftsmen, scholars, and artisans were carried east to enrich the Mongol domains. To the north, beyond the steppe, lay the Rus principalities, divided among rival princes. Their cities of wood and stone stood along rivers and forests, proud but quarrelsome. For generations they had fought each other, seldom uniting. To the Mongols, such disunity was an invitation. Batu, son of Jochi, was given command, accompanied by the brilliant Subutai, who had already campaigned across Persia and the Caucasus. Their armies rode west, crossing the Volga River, descending upon the Rus with fire and iron. City after city was taken. Ryazan resisted and was burned to the ground. Vladimir fell, its prince slain. Moscow, then only a growing town, was destroyed. Kiev, ancient heart of Rus, was besieged, its proud walls shattered by catapults, its churches burned. The princes who survived bent the knee, forced to send tribute eastward. The Rus were not erased as the Tangut had been, but bound in chains of fear and silver. For centuries, the shadow of the Mongols would loom over them, but Batu and Subutai did not stop. They pressed farther west, into Poland and Hungary, riding against armies that had never faced such foes. At the Battle of Legnica in 1241, Polish knights, armored and proud, charged with lances lowered. The Mongols scattered them with feigned retreats, encircled them, and cut them down with arrows and sabers. In Hungary, at the Battle of Mohi, the Mongols crushed the armies of King Bela IV using smoke, fire, and cunning maneuvers to turn the battlefield into a slaughter. Europe trembled. Beyond the Hungarian plain lay Austria, Germany, and even the heart of the Holy Roman Empire. Kings and popes prayed, armies gathered, cities fortified. Chroniclers wrote that the Mongols were demons sent by God, a scourge upon Christendom. Yet just as Europe seemed doomed, the storm turned back. For word had come from the east. Ugedei, great Khan of the Mongols, was dead. According to tradition, no prince of the blood could remain campaigning while the empire awaited a new Kurultai. And so, at the height of their victories, the Mongol armies withdrew. Europe had been spared not by strength of arms, but by death and tradition. While Batu and Subutai carved their names into the west, Tolui had turned south into the Islamic world, where resistance smoldered. But Tolui, loyal and unflinching, soon followed his father into death, said to have sacrificed himself in a ritual to save the people from plague. His line, however, was far from extinguished. His son Munka and his grandson, the fierce Kublai, would rise to power in years to come. Ugedei, though victorious in the east, struggled with his own appetites. He drank deeply, more than his body could endure. His reign saw the empire expand but also strain, its administration growing complex as lands stretched from the Yellow Sea to the Black Sea. Yet even with his flaws, he held the empire together, building roads, stations, and systems to bind the vast distances. But his death in 1241 would set in motion struggles that would shape the future, for the storm that Genghis Khan had unleashed did not end with his passing. His sons and grandsons would carry it farther still, into the heart of China, into Baghdad, into Korea, into the jungles of Southeast Asia. The empire was no longer the vision of one man. It was now a force carried by bloodlines, ambition, and destiny. The world had seen Genghis Khan as the punishment of God. Now, under his heirs, the storm spread wider than even he had dreamed. The death of Ugedei left the empire unsettled. His son, Guyuk, claimed the throne, but his rule was short and troubled. Quarrels erupted among the princes, each line of Genghis Khan's blood vying for supremacy. Batu, in the west, resented the memory of Guyuk. whose arrogance had nearly led to civil war. The empire seemed in danger of fracturing, as Berta had once warned, torn apart by the pride of wolves without their father's guiding hand. It was Tolui's line that ultimately rose above the quarrels. Mongke, son of Tolui, emerged as Great Khan, chosen in a Kurultai that brought unity once more. Where Guyuk had been stern and proud, Mongke was pragmatic, firm, and relentless. He set about stabilizing the empire, strengthening its administration, and renewing its campaigns. Under Mongke, the storm spread in two vast directions. To the west, his brother Hulagu led an army into the heart of the Islamic world. To the east, his other brother Kublai prepared to bring all of China beneath Mongol rule. Hulagu's march west was unlike any that had come before. His Tumans crossed Persia, suppressing rebellions and seizing cities until they stood at the gates of Baghdad, the jewel of the Abbasid Caliphate, a city famed for its scholars, libraries, and wealth. The Caliph, al-Mustasim, underestimated the Mongols, believing his walls and his prestige would protect him. But the Mongols came with fire. Engineers from China and Persia built siege towers, catapults, and mangonels that hurled stones and flaming pots. The city was encircled, its fate sealed. In February 1258, the walls were breached. Mongol soldiers poured through, cutting down defenders and citizens alike. For days, the city burned. Its palaces collapsed. Its markets were looted. Its libraries thrown into the Tigris, where, legend said, the river ran black with ink and red with blood. The caliph was captured, wrapped in a carpet, and trampled beneath horses, executed without shedding royal blood, as Mongol custom demanded. With his death, the Abbasid Caliphate ended, and the Islamic world was shaken to its core. While Hulagu carved out what would become the Ilkhanate in Persia, Kublai turned east. The Jin were gone, but the southern Song still ruled half of China, a land of wealth and vast armies. The Mongols had long coveted it, but its rivers, mountains, and disciplined troops had made it formidable. Kublai, however, brought patience and strategy. He adopted Chinese advisors, studied their governance, and began to envision himself not only as Khan of the Mongols, but as Emperor of China. His armies pressed south, crossing rivers with pontoon bridges, battering walled cities with siege machines, and starving fortresses into submission. The Song resisted fiercely, their generals and scholars rallying their people. Battles raged on rivers as much as on land, with Mongol fleets built by Chinese shipwrights clashing against Song warships. Slowly, inexorably, the Mongols advanced. City by city, province by province, the Song fell back. Mongke himself oversaw campaigns in Sichuan, but in 1259 he fell ill and died, leaving the empire once more in turmoil. His death halted the great southern push, and rivalries flared. Kublai claimed the title of Great Khan, but his brother Arik Boka challenged him, and the empire was torn by civil war. For years, battles raged not only against foreign enemies but among the Mongols themselves, as the once united storm threatened to break apart. Yet Kublai prevailed. From his capital in the north, he declared himself ruler not only of the Mongols, but of China itself, founding the Yuan dynasty in 1271. His reign marked a transformation. The steppe horsemen, who had once lived by the bow, now ruled as emperors in the richest land on earth. In 1279, after years of struggle, the last Song stronghold fell at the Battle of Yamen. The young emperor drowned as his fleet was destroyed, and with him ended centuries of Chinese rule. The Mongols now controlled all of China, the greatest prize of all, from Karakoram to Beijing, from Baghdad to Kiev, from Samarkand to Kaifeng. The empire of Genghis Khan's heirs stretched across continents. Yet though vast, it was no longer as unified as in the days of the first Khan. Each line of his blood now carved out its own dominion. The Yuan dynasty in China under Kublai, the Ilkhanate in Persia under Hulagu, the Golden Horde in the steppes under Batu's descendants, and the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia. The storm had spread, but it had also divided. Still, for a time, the world remained under their shadow. Travelers from distant lands like Marco Polo, marveled at the splendor of Kublai's court. Merchants rode in safety along the Silk Roads, protected by Mongol patrols. Ideas, inventions, and goods flowed as never before. Yet behind the prosperity lay fear, for the memory of cities burned, of libraries drowned, and of rulers trampled still haunted the world. The storm that Genghis Khan had unleashed had now touched nearly every corner of the known world. And though his sons and grandsons had turned against one another, the echoes of that storm would shape history for centuries to come. His sons and grandsons of Genghis Khan had carried his legacy farther than even he might have dreamed. From the plains of Hungary to the shores of Korea, from the steppes of Siberia to the deserts of Persia, their banners had flown, their horses had thundered, and their arrows had darkened the skies. Under Ogadai, the Jin dynasty was crushed. Under Batu and Subutai, the Rus were subdued and Europe was made to tremble. Under Hulagu, the Caliphate of Baghdad, once the beating heart of Islam, was destroyed. Under Kublai, the Song dynasty was conquered, and China itself brought beneath Mongol rule. For a brief and brilliant moment, the world was bound together under Mongol law. The Silk Roads were made safe for merchants. Envoys crossed continents without fear, and ideas traveled as swiftly as caravans. The empire of Genghis Khan had become not just the largest in history, but the first to connect East and West in a single vast system. And yet, even at its height, the seeds of division had been sown. Each branch of Genghis Khan's blood held its own lands, its own ambitions. The Golden Horde ruled the steppes and the Rus. The Chagatai Khans held Central Asia. The Ilkhans ruled Persia. And the Yuan emperors reigned in China. What had begun as one storm was now many, each striking in its own direction, sometimes against each other. Still, the shadow of the Mongols stretched far. Kings in Europe, sultans in the Middle East, and emperors in Asia measured their strength against the memory of Mongol hooves. Even where their rule did not last, their impact endured. Trade routes flourished, borders shifted, dynasties rose and fell in their wake. And always, behind every conquest, behind every new Khan, the memory of one man endured. Temujin, born on the steppe with nothing but hunger and hardship, had risen to become Genghis Khan, the unifier, the conqueror, the scourge, the lawgiver. His descendants had spread his storm across the world, but it was his vision, his will, that had set it all in motion. The story of the Mongol Empire was far from over, but the height of its power had been reached. The storm had spread to every horizon, and though it would one day fade, the world it left behind would never be the same. The Mongol Empire had touched every horizon, its banners carried from the shores of the Pacific to the plains of Hungary, from the frozen forests of Siberia to the deserts of Persia. At its height, it seemed eternal, unstoppable, a storm sent by the eternal blue sky itself. Yet no storm lasts forever. The first cracks appeared even before the empire reached its peak. Each son and grandson of Genghis Khan had been granted lands, and with those lands came ambition. The Golden Horde ruled the steppes and Rus. The Chagatai Khanate held Central Asia. The Ilkhanate dominated Persia, and the Yuan dynasty reigned in China under Kublai. Though bound by blood and memory, they were separated by distance, culture, and rivalry. Kublai, the most powerful, sat upon the throne of the Yuan dynasty in China. He was no longer a Khan of the steppe alone, but an emperor in the Chinese mold, wrapped in silk, surrounded by scholars and courtiers. He built a new capital at Khanbalik, the city that would one day be known as Beijing. His empire was rich, its cities bustling, its granaries full. Yet even he struggled to hold his vast domain together. For while the Mongols had conquered, they had not always ruled with understanding. The Chinese saw the Yuan as foreign overlords. Revolts flared in the countryside, bandits rose from the mountains, and the people whispered of dynasties past, longing for a time before the storm. Kublai's fleets sailed to Japan, only to be destroyed by storms the Japanese called kamikaze, divine winds. Armies marched into Vietnam and the jungles of Southeast Asia, only to be worn down by heat, disease, and ambush. Even the mightiest empire had limits. In the West, Hulagu's Ilkhanate prospered at first, but it soon collided with the Mamluks of Egypt, a power the Mongols had not yet faced. At Ain Jalut in 1260, Mongol cavalry met disciplined Mamluk forces, bolstered by slaves who had once fought under the Mongol banner themselves. For the first time, the Mongols were decisively defeated in open battle. The legend of invincibility was broken. The Golden Horde, under Batu's descendants, ruled the Rus with tribute and terror, but they too faced challenges. The princes of Moscow grew in strength, biding their time, paying silver while slowly building power. To the Mongols, Moscow was but a small town. To the future, it would be the heart of resistance. The Chagatai Khans, ruling Central Asia, quarreled among themselves, their lands fragmenting into smaller domains. Rivalries of blood and faith weakened them, and the unity that had once given the Mongols their strength began to fade. And beneath it all, the old bond, the vision of Genghis Khan, grew faint. The Khans no longer met in great councils to decide the fate of the world. They no longer rode together as brothers, united by the law of the steppe. They were rulers now, emperors, lords of cities and thrones, each consumed by his own domain. When Kublai died in 1294, the empire he had held together began to crumble. His heirs lacked his authority, and rebellion spread across China. Corruption seeped into the Yuan court, eunuchs and ministers growing fat while the people starved. Floods, famine, and plague struck, and the people rose in anger. By the mid-14th century, the Red Turban Rebellion had swept across the land, and the Yuan dynasty was driven from China. In 1368, the Ming dynasty rose in its place, and the Mongols fled back to the steppe, their dream of ruling China at an end. In Persia, the Ilkhanate weakened as successors quarreled, their dynasty ending in fragments. In Central Asia, the Chagatai Khans lost their grip, their lands falling into the hands of local rulers. The Golden Horde lingered longer, but even there, cracks widened as rival princes fought, and the Rus grew stronger, no longer mere tributaries, but rulers in their own right. By the 15th century, what had once been the greatest empire in history was gone. The Mongols still rode the steppe, still lived by the bow and the horse, but their unity was no more. The storm had spent itself, and yet, the memory endured. The law of Genghis Khan, the Yasa, echoed in distant lands. The roads the Mongols built, the trade they secured, the knowledge they carried, remained long after their empire fell. Their conquest had changed the world, linking east and west, spreading ideas, goods, and even disease across continents. The eternal blue sky had given Genghis Khan power to shape history, and though his empire faded, his name did not. To some, he remained a monster, a scourge of God who left only ashes. To others, he was a hero, a unifier who turned scattered tribes into a nation. To all, he was unforgettable. From the day of his birth on the lonely steppe to the vast empire carved by his sons and grandsons, the story of Genghis Khan and his people was one of hardship, fury, and destiny. The storm had passed, but its thunder still echoed across the ages. The storm that Genghis Khan unleashed swept across continents, shattered empires, and reshaped the world. From the lonely boy Temujin, abandoned on the steppe, came an empire that stretched farther than any before or since. His descendants carried his will to China, Persia, Russia, and beyond, their hooves striking fear and awe in equal measure. Yet, in the end, the empire fractured. The Yuan dynasty fell, the Ilkhanate dissolved, the Chagatai Khans vanished into obscurity, and the Golden Horde broke apart. What had once been united under one law, one vision, became scattered kingdoms, remembered only in stories and ruins. And still, the echo endures. The Mongols opened the Silk Roads, carrying goods, ideas, and knowledge across the world. They brought paper, printing, gunpowder, and compasses from east to west. They reshaped maps and altered the destiny of nations. Their legacy can be traced in the rise of Moscow, in the Ming dynasty of China, in the shifting of powers in the Middle East. For the Mongols themselves, Genghis Khan is more than a memory. In the green valleys of Mongolia, his name is still spoken with reverence. He is not just a conqueror, but a lawgiver, a father of a people who once rode together as one. His spirit is invoked in songs, monuments, and the eternal blue sky above the steppe. To the wider world, his legacy is more complex. To some, he remains a destroyer, a scourge who burned cities and ended dynasties. To others, he is a visionary who united the steppe and forged a bridge between civilizations. Both views are true, for the storm was both destruction and renewal. Centuries have passed, but the man endures. Scholars trace his bloodline in millions of descendants across Asia. His genetic legacy is vast as the empire he forged. Historians still debate his impact, while travelers to Mongolia stand before his colossal statue, gazing eastward as if he still seeks new horizons to conquer. Temujin, the boy who once hunted for scraps with his brothers, became Genghis Khan, whose name is remembered in every corner of the earth. His life was a tale of survival, struggle, ambition, and destiny, a story written in blood and thunder, but also in law and unity. The storm has passed, the hooves are silent, the banners are gone. Yet in the endless sky above the steppe, the spirit of Genghis Khan still rides, eternal as the wind. And now, our journey across the steppes comes to a close. Genghis Khan's story reminds us of courage, vision, and the vastness of history. But for tonight, it's time to leave the world of legends behind. Breathe deeply, feel the calm settle over you, and let yourself drift peacefully into sleep. Thank you for listening. Sweet dreams, until we meet again on your channel name.